Her hands were soaked in his blood, and she didn't even know his name. All she knew was that he was dying right there on her table, and every instinct she had screamed, "Save him." So she did. She broke protocol. She broke rules. She may have broken the law. And when he opened his eyes just for a second, he looked at her like no one ever had, like she was the only real thing in a world full of shadows. That was her first mistake. If this story already has you hooked, subscribe right now, drop your city in the comments, and don't you dare go anywhere. This is only the beginning. The Friday night shift at Cook County General was the kind of shift that turned good nurses into hollow-eyed survivors. Emma Richardson had been doing this for 11 years. 11 years of Friday nights of code blues and car crashes of holding someone's hand while their family fell apart in the waiting room. She knew the rhythm of chaos. She had learned long ago to breathe inside it rather than fight it. But nothing, not 11 years, not 1,000 Friday nights, had prepared her for what walked through those doors at 11:47 p.m. She heard them before she saw them. Heavy footsteps. Too many of them. Moving too fast, too coordinated, not the stumbling panic of a family rushing in a loved one, but something else entirely. Something deliberate. Emma looked up from the triage station. 6 men, all of them in dark, expensive suits, the kind you didn't see in this part of Chicago unless someone was in serious trouble. They were big, controlled, and their eyes swept the room the way predators sweep an open field, not afraid, not desperate. Calculating. 2 of them carried a man between them. "We need a doctor. Now." The voice belonged to the tallest one, broad jaw, silver at his temples, a scar along his left cheekbone that hadn't healed clean. His tone wasn't a plea, it was a command. Emma was already moving. "Set him on the gurney right here, right now." The man with the scar looked at her, really looked at her for half a second, like he was deciding something. Then he nodded once, and his men lowered the unconscious figure onto the gurney with a precision that struck Emma as wrong for the situation. Careful, almost reverent. She pulled on gloves and leaned in. The man was tall, even lying down she could tell. Dark hair, mid-40s maybe, Italian features, strong jaw, olive skin. His white dress shirt had been unbuttoned at some point, and the left side of it was soaked through with dark arterial blood. His color was bad. His breathing was shallow and uneven. Emma's fingers found his neck. Pulse thready, fast and weak like a candle fighting wind. "What happened to him?" she snapped. "He fell," the tall man said. Emma looked up sharply. "He fell." "That's what I said." She looked back down at the wound, the angle, the depth, the distribution of the blood. Her jaw tightened. "He didn't fall. This is a gunshot wound to the left lateral abdomen. Possible internal hemorrhage." "How long ago?" Silence. "How long ago?" The tall man's eyes were stone. 40 minutes, 40 minutes. Emma felt the number land in her chest like a punch. "I need a trauma bay, right now. Dr. Kessler, I need Kessler on the radio. I need 2 units of ONEG, and I need everybody who isn't essential to back up." She was already moving the gurney, already shouting orders down the hallway, already calculating blood loss, blood pressure, the math of survival that she ran in her head like a second language. The men in suits followed. "Sir." She stopped, turned, planted herself in front of the tall one. "You cannot come back here." He stared at her. He was at least a foot taller than she was. He had the kind of stillness that made the air feel heavier. "I go where he goes," he said simply. "Not in my trauma bay, you don't." Emma didn't flinch. She'd faced down drunks, gang members, grieving fathers with clenched fists. She had learned that the body language of authority, shoulders square, voice level, eye contact unbroken, worked on almost anyone. "You can wait right outside that door. I will tell you everything as soon as I know something. But if you come in that room, I cannot save him. Do you understand me?" A long, terrible pause. "Then don't let him die." It wasn't a threat exactly, but it wasn't not a threat either. Emma turned back to her patient and ran. The trauma bay was controlled madness. 2 nurses, Diane and a young man named Carlos, who'd only been on the floor 6 weeks, flanked the gurney as Emma worked. Dr. Kessler arrived 3 minutes in, took one look at the situation, and fell into step beside her without being asked. That was why she liked Kessler. He didn't posture. He just worked. "BP's dropping," Diane called out. 70 over 50 and falling. He's bleeding internally, Emma said. We need to figure out where. Kessler leaned in, examined the wound, pressed 2 fingers to the abdomen. The unconscious man's body flinched, even unconscious, even this close to the edge. His body recoiled from pain. He's in there, Kessler murmured. Not a clinical observation. Something almost human. He needs an OR, hissing, Emma said. We need to stabilize him first, or he won't make it to OR. I know. Their hands moved. IVs, fluids, pressure. The monitors screamed and then quieted and then screamed again. Carlos was pale, swallowing hard, but keeping up. Diane had the focused calm of 20 years on trauma. She'd seen worse, her face said. But even Diane's jaw was set a little tighter than usual. At the 12-minute mark, the unconscious man opened his eyes. Not fully, just a sliver, dark irises fighting through the sedation of blood loss and shock. His gaze drifted unfocused across the ceiling. Then it found Emma, and it stopped. She didn't know why she noticed it. She was in the middle of a procedure, her hands doing 3 things at once. But something in the quality of his attention, even half-conscious, even dying, made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. He was looking at her like he was trying to memorize her face. Stay with me, she said automatically. It was what she always said. You're going to be okay. Stay with me. His lips moved. No sound came out. Then his eyes closed again. BP's coming up, Diane said, surprised, lifting her voice slightly. 78/55. Kessler exhaled through his nose. Good, that's good. Let's get him upstairs. Emma stepped back, peeled off her outer gloves, let the team take over the transport. She was aware of her own heartbeat in a way she usually wasn't mid-shift. She pressed her back against the wall for exactly 3 seconds to feel the adrenaline acknowledge it and put it back in its box. Then she pushed off the wall and walked back out to face the men in suits. The tall man, the one who'd spoken for the group, was exactly where she'd left him. Right outside the trauma bay door. The other 5 had arranged themselves at intervals down the hallway, and she noticed with a cold clarity that none of them were on their phones. None of them were pacing. They were watching. Every exit, every person who moved. These weren't family members. He's alive, Emma said, stopping 3 feet away from the tall man. We're taking him to surgery. He had internal bleeding and the bullet nicked the intestinal wall. The surgeons will handle it from here. The tall man's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted a flicker so brief she almost missed it. Will he survive the surgery? I can't make promises, but we got to him in time. His odds are better than they were 20 minutes ago. She paused. I need his information. Name, medical history, insurance. I'll provide everything you need. His name, Emma said. Another pause. Longer this time. Moretti, the tall man said. Dante Moretti. Emma wrote it on the intake form she was holding. She didn't look up. And you are Marco. I work for Mr. Moretti. She looked up then. Something about the way he said work for, not I'm his brother or I'm his friend, but the careful formal work for landed differently than it should have. Is there family we should call? She asked. I am his family, Marco said. Everything goes through me. Emma held his gaze for a beat. Okay, someone from the surgical team will update you when they have more information. In the meantime, I need you and your, she glanced down the hallway, associates to remain in the waiting area. Hospital policy. Marco looked at her, that same assessing look as before. You saved his life tonight. I did my job tonight. That's the same thing, he said very quietly. She turned and walked away because there was nothing else to say, and because something about the way he'd said it made her want to be somewhere else, anywhere else, very quickly. She thought about Dante Moretti exactly twice for the rest of her shift. Once at 2 a.m. when she overheard 2 orderlies whispering about the men in the waiting room. Did you see the size of those guys? Do you think they're mob? I heard someone say, mob, and she told herself it was none of her business. She'd done her job. Whatever came after wasn't her concern. And once at 4 a.m., charting in the break room with a cold cup of coffee, when she caught herself thinking about the way he'd looked at her, that sliver of dark iris that arrested almost desperate focus, and she shook her head and clicked her pen and told herself to stop it. At 6:15 a.m., she clocked out. At 6:22 a.m., she stepped out of the elevator into the hospital lobby, pulling her jacket on, already mentally calculating whether she could sleep before her mother's 10 o'clock appointment. Marco was standing in the lobby. She stopped. He was alone, which somehow made him more imposing, not less. He held a plain white envelope in one hand. Ms. Richardson, he said. She hadn't told him her name. The realization moved through her slowly and then all at once like cold water. He's out of surgery, Marco said before she could speak. Stable. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery. A beat. Because of you. Because of the whole team, Emma said carefully. I was one part of that. Marco extended the envelope. She didn't take it. What is that, Mr. Moretti's gratitude? I don't need Mr. Richardson. His voice was measured, patient, like a man used to being obeyed and choosing in this moment to explain himself anyway. In Mr. Moretti's world, debts are taken very seriously. He owes you his life. He wants you to know he understands that. Emma stared at the envelope. I can't accept gifts from patients. Then consider it a donation, to whatever cause you see fit. He set the envelope on the low table beside him when she still didn't reach for it. Have a good morning. He walked away. She stood there for a long moment looking at the envelope. She left it on the table. She walked to the parking garage, got in her car, and drove home through the gray Chicago dawn. She didn't think about Dante Moretti. She thought about her mother's appointment and whether there was enough coffee at home and the stack of bills she needed to pay before the 15th. That was what she told herself. She found the roses on her doorstep at 7:30 a.m., 24, white, no card. She stood in the doorway of her apartment building, keys in hand, and looked at them for a long time. Florists didn't deliver at 7:30 a.m. She brought them inside because it seemed rude not to, and put them in a vase, and went to sleep for 3 hours. And when she woke up, she told herself she was being paranoid. That was Thursday. By Saturday, she wasn't so sure. It was the black car that made her certain. She'd noticed it Friday afternoon, parked across from the coffee shop where she stopped every morning. Dark, late model, tinted windows. She might not have noticed at all, except it was there again on Saturday, same spot, and when she came out with her coffee, the car didn't move, but somehow she felt the weight of someone watching. She called her friend Jackie from the parking lot because calling someone felt safer than standing there alone with the feeling. You're paranoid, Jackie said immediately. You work trauma. You're hardwired to see danger everywhere. Jackie, Emma, honey, did you sleep yesterday? 3 hours? 3 hours. You're running on fumes and adrenaline. Go home. Sleep. Eat something. Emma looked at the car. The car sat there mute and patient. Yeah, she said. You're probably right. She wasn't right. Emma had lived in Wicker Park for 4 years. She knew her neighborhood the way, a thing you've walked through 1,000 times. The rhythms, the regulars, the details that shouldn't shift. And over the next 48 hours, things shifted. A man she'd never seen before reading a newspaper on the bench outside her building. Gone when she looked again, but there again the next morning. Her neighbor, old Mr. Petrosky, mentioning casually that a very polite young man had asked him if the nurse on the 3rd floor had lived here long. A very polite young man. Emma sat with that one for a while. She was not the kind of woman who frightened easily. She had grown up with a single mother who worked double shifts and taught her that the world didn't slow down for fear, so you just carried it with you and kept moving. She had held dying people's hands without flinching. She had told families their worst news without looking away. But this quiet, deliberate closing in, this was different. This wasn't the kind of danger you could treat or stabilize or outlast by sheer will. This was something she didn't have protocols for. She picked up her phone, called the number on the card. She hadn't meant to keep the one she'd found in her jacket pocket 2 days after her shift in Marco's handwriting, with only a phone number and the words, if you need anything. It rang once. Miss Richardson, Marco said. She hadn't given him her number either. Someone's been watching my apartment, she said, keeping her voice level. I want to know if it's your people. A pause. Very brief. Yes. The single syllable landed like a stone in still water. Excuse me, she said. 2 men, both trustworthy. They're there for your protection, not your surveillance. I did not give anyone permission to, Ms. Richardson. Marco's voice was if anything gentler, which somehow made it worse. In the last 72 hours, 3 separate parties have made inquiries about who treated Mr. Moretti at Cook County General. 2 of those inquiries came from people who do not make inquiries out of curiosity. We became aware of this yesterday evening. The world tilted slightly. Emma pressed her back against the wall of her apartment and breathed through it. What does that mean? It means that by saving Mr. Moretti's life, you became visible to people who would prefer he hadn't survived. Another pause. I'm sorry. That's not a situation you asked for and it's not fair, but it is the reality. You're telling me I'm in danger, Emma said, because I saved a man's life. I'm telling you that Mr. Moretti is aware of that danger and that he has taken steps. Without asking me. Yes, without asking you, which is why I'm telling you now. A beat. He would like to speak with you himself, at your convenience, no pressure, no obligation. Emma closed her eyes. She thought about white roses at 7:30 a.m. She thought about a man with dark eyes finding her face in a trauma bay and not looking away. She thought about an envelope she'd left on a table in a hospital lobby and wondered for the first time whether leaving it had been the thing that had set all of this into motion, some signal she'd sent without knowing the language. When, she said, whenever you're ready. She almost laughed. That's the problem, she said. I'm not sure ready is something I'm going to be. Marco said nothing to that. He didn't offer reassurance or pressure. He just waited, and somehow his patience was the most frightening thing of all. I'll call you back, Emma said. Of course. She hung up. She sat in her apartment, the one she'd chosen carefully, the one where she kept her mother's old photographs on the bookshelf and her scrubs folded in a specific order, and her life arranged exactly the way she needed it, and she felt for the first time like the walls were very slightly closer than they'd been before. Out the window on the street below, a dark car. Patient. Still. Watching over her, Marco had said. Watching over her, Emma Richardson, who had never been anyone's responsibility but her own, pressed her hands flat on her knees and stared at the ceiling and tried to decide what to do with a world that had changed around her while she wasn't looking. She had saved a man's life. And now, whether she wanted it or not, that man's life was entangled with hers. The question was what happened next, and more importantly, did she get to be the one who decided? She called Marco back at noon, not because she'd made peace with any of it, not because she'd slept or eaten or found some rational framework that made the situation feel less like the ground had opened beneath her feet. She called him back because she had spent 3 hours sitting with the alternative, doing nothing, knowing nothing, waiting for something she couldn't name to come find her anyway, and that felt worse. Emma Richardson had never been good at waiting. Tell him I'll meet him, she said the moment Marco picked up. Somewhere public. A restaurant, a cafe somewhere with other people around. And I want an hour's notice before we meet, not less. Of course, Marco said, like she'd asked for something entirely reasonable. And Marco. She paused, choosing the next words carefully. I'm not doing this because I'm scared. I'm doing this because I want answers. There's a difference. I understand the difference, Ms. Richardson. Good. She hung up. 45 minutes later, her phone buzzed. An address. A restaurant in the Gold Coast, the kind of place with a hostess stand and white tablecloths and a clientele that didn't glance up when a stranger walked in. Public enough. Controlled enough. She told herself that was why she went. She got there 12 minutes early because she always got places early. It was the nurse in her, the constant low-grade alertness, the need to assess a space before she was in it. She sat down, ordered water, and watched the door. Dante Moretti walked in at exactly 1 p.m. She recognized him from the gurney, but only just. The man she'd treated had been pale boneless, with blood loss stripped down to pure biological urgency. This man moving through the restaurant with a slight stiffness at his left side that he was clearly working to minimize was something else entirely. He wore a dark suit, no tie. He walked like a man who had decided years ago that rooms belonged to him when he entered them. He saw her immediately, and for the second time he looked at her like she was the only fixed point in a room full of motion. He sat down across from her. Up close, the recovery showed there was still a faint pallor under his tan, and she could see from the way he settled into the chair the exact location of the wound on his left side. But his eyes were sharp, dark, and completely alert. Ms. Richardson, he said. His voice was lower than she'd expected. Measured. Mr. Moretti. She folded her hands on the table. You look better than the last time I saw you. Something crossed his face, not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. I'm told that's entirely your doing. It was a team effort. My team tells me you were the one who made the call on the procedure, that if you'd waited for a more senior physician, I wouldn't have made it. He held her gaze. So I'm going to thank you directly, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't deflect this time. Emma blinked. Excuse me? Marco said you deflected his thanks twice. The envelope, the team effort. He tilted his head slightly. You saved my life. I'd like to acknowledge that without you redirecting it to a committee. She stared at him. You're very direct. So are you. I respect that. She held the stare for a moment, then let out a short breath. You're welcome, she said. I'm really glad you survived. Now, can we talk about why someone is sitting outside my apartment building? Dante didn't flinch. Yes, we can. He leaned forward, slightly careful with his left side, and his voice dropped not to a whisper, but to the register of someone who was used to conversations that were not meant for anyone else's ears. 3 organizations knew I was going to be in that part of the city Friday night. One of them is responsible for what happened to me. The other 2, he paused. They're asking questions about who was in that ER, about who treated me, about whether any witnesses could speak to the fact that I survived. Emma kept her face neutral. Witnesses, she repeated. You're not a witness in the legal sense. You're a liability in the political one. Political. In my world, Dante said quietly, political and lethal tend to overlap. He paused again, and she got the sense he was choosing his words with unusual care. I put my men outside your apartment because I owed you a debt before you were in danger. Now that you are in danger, a danger that exists solely because you helped me, I consider it a matter of non-negotiable responsibility. Emma looked at him for a long moment. And if I tell you I don't want your men outside my apartment, then I would ask you to let me explain the full situation before you make that decision. His jaw tightened fractionally, and I would tell you honestly that asking them to leave would be one of the harder orders I've given. There it was, the first real crack in the composure. Small, barely there. But Emma was good at reading what bodies said when voices stayed controlled, and what his body said in that moment was something she hadn't expected. He was afraid. Not for himself, for her. She sat back in her chair. Tell me the full situation, she said. So he did. He talked for 20 minutes without stopping, and she listened the way she listened to patients describing symptoms, cataloging, cross-referencing, watching for what was held back as much as what was said. He told her about the 3 families, about a territorial dispute that had been building for 2 years, about the ambush Friday night, 6 men, 2 cars, a stretch of road between a business meeting and his own front door, about Marco pulling him out and making the call to go to the nearest ER rather than the private physician who normally handled these situations because there hadn't been time. He told her that the family responsible, the Vasquez operation working up from the south side, had people inside 2 city hospitals. Not staff, but informants. People who passed along information about who came in, who was treated, who was present. They know you treated me, Tom, he said. They know your name. The words dropped into Emma's chest like stones into deep water. They know my name, she repeated. Yes. She breathed through the silence for a moment. My mother, she said. She lives in Oak Park. She's 71. She's already covered, Dante said. His voice was entirely steady. Since Friday night, she thinks the man in the car outside her building is a new neighbor. Emma looked at him. You covered my mother before you even spoke to me. Yes. Without asking. Yes. He held her gaze without apology. I understand that's a violation of... It's not a violation. Her voice came out sharper than she intended. I don't know what it is. It's a lot. She pressed her fingers to her temple for a moment. You knew Friday night that I was in danger. Marco flagged it Saturday morning. I was still in surgery Saturday morning. A pause. The moment I was conscious and coherent enough to give orders, the first thing I did was make sure you were covered. The roses were Saturday morning, Emma said slowly. Dante looked at her. Someone left white roses on my doorstep at 7:30 a.m. Saturday, she said. I assumed it was from you. Was it... Something shifted in his expression. No, he said carefully, it wasn't. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than the ones before it. Emma felt the fine hairs along her arms stand up. Then who? That's what I'd like to know. He said it quietly, but the controlled stillness of him had changed quality. There was something very alert underneath it now. He reached for his phone, typed something, briefly set it down. Marco was looking into it as of 30 seconds ago. So someone else was at my door Saturday morning, Emma said, before your men were in place. My men were in place, but Saturday afternoon, there was a gap. His jaw was tight. That gap concerns me. It concerns you, Emma said. Try being me. For the first time, something that was genuinely, plainly human moved across his face. Not the politician's composure or the patriarch's authority. Just a man looking at a woman who was sitting across from him because his life had put her in the path of something she never should have encountered, and feeling the full weight of that. I'm sorry, he said. It was so simple, so unguarded. She hadn't expected it. I don't say that as a formality, he continued. I know what it means to have your safety compromised in your own home. I know what that does to a person. And you are in this position because you chose to save a stranger's life. The debt I owe you isn't just gratitude. He stopped, seemed to choose the next word deliberately, responsibility. Emma looked at him for a long time. I believe you, she said finally, which surprised her because had never been someone who gave that quickly. I don't know if that's smart, but I believe you. It's probably not smart, he said. At least you're honest about it. I try to be. A beat. Especially with people I owe my life to. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, her mother's number. She felt her heart lurch. I have to. Take it, Dante said immediately. She picked up. Mom. Hi, sweetheart. Her mother's voice easy and warm, the voice of a woman who had no idea anything had changed. I wanted to see if you're still coming for dinner Sunday. I'm making the chicken. Emma's eyes closed briefly. Yeah, Mom, I'll be there Sunday. Are you all right? You sound funny. I'm fine. I'm at lunch with a colleague. I'll call you tonight, okay? Okay, honey. Love you. Love you too. She hung up. When she opened her eyes, Dante was watching her with an expression she couldn't entirely read. She sounds kind, he said. She is. Emma's voice was steady, which is exactly why I need you to tell me what you need from me, what I need to do and how long this lasts. I need a timeline and a plan, not just men in parked cars. Dante nodded slowly. Fair, he said. Here is what I can tell you. He leaned forward again. The situation with the Vasquez family will come to a resolution within the next 2 to 3 weeks. I am actively working to accelerate that. In the meantime, you have 2 options. Go on, she said. You can continue your life as normal with my protection in place rendezvous. You'd be aware of it, but it would be designed not to interfere with your daily routine. You'd go to work, you'd see your mother, you'd live with a shadow you can't always see. Or, he paused. I have a property outside the city, safe, comfortable, private. You could stay there until this is resolved. Your mother could come. You wouldn't be prisoners, you'd be guests. But you'd be off the board entirely, which makes you significantly harder to threaten. Emma stared at him. You're asking me to leave my life. I'm giving you a choice about how to protect it. There's a difference. Yes, he said. There is. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had worked over him on a table 11 days ago. She thought about her apartment and her mother's chicken on Sundays and her 11 years of Friday nights and the particular hard-won piece of the life she'd built carefully out of long hours and small savings and the stubbornness of a woman who'd decided at 22 that she would be okay. I'm not going to a safe house, she said. Then you'll have my protection in place. I have conditions. His expression didn't change. Name them. Your people are visible to me. I know who they are. I have a way to reach them. They don't come into my apartment. They don't speak to my mother without my knowledge, and they don't interfere with my work. She held up one finger for each condition. And you tell me, directly, not through Marco, if anything changes. If the threat level increases, if something shifts, I hear it from you. Dante regarded her for a moment. Why directly from me? Because you're better at telling me the truth than your people are. She met his gaze evenly. Marco is loyal to you first. That means he'll manage what I know. You at least seem to understand that managing me is not going to work. A pause, and then slow, careful, like he wasn't entirely accustomed to the feeling. Dante Moretti smiled. Not a politician's smile, not a weapon, just a real one. Agreed, he said. Good. She picked up her water glass and took a long sip because her mouth was dry and her hands needed something to do. One more thing. Yes, the roses. I want to know who left them. So do I, Dante said, and the smile was gone, replaced by something harder and quieter. Believe me. She believed him. That was the part that kept catching her off guard, how consistently, how inconveniently she believed him. She'd walked into this restaurant braced for performance, for the careful management of a powerful man trying to contain a problem. What she'd found instead was something messier and more human, and she didn't entirely know what to do with that. They parted on the sidewalk outside the restaurant. Marco materialized from somewhere behind them with a car, and Dante paused before getting in. Ms. Richardson, he said. Emma, she said, because Ms. Richardson was what you called the woman who treated you. And whatever she was now, it wasn't only that. He looked at her for a moment. Something passed through his face, brief, complicated, contained. Emma, he said, thank you for today, not just for Friday. She nodded once. Stay out of trouble, she said, which was a ridiculous thing to say to a mafia boss, and she knew it the moment it left her mouth. But Dante didn't laugh. He just looked at her with those careful, dark eyes and said very quietly, I'll try. Then he got in the car. Emma walked to her own car 3 blocks away, with Marco's man trailing her at a respectful distance, visible now as per her conditions. A young guy in a gray jacket, maybe 28, who nodded at her when she glanced back. She nodded back. She got in her car, sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at it for 3 rings, then answered. Silence. And then a voice, low, deliberate, unhurried. You shouldn't have brought him back, the voice said. Next time, let the man die. The call ended. Emma sat completely still, her phone in her hand, her heart slamming against her ribs with a force that had nothing to do with the measured professional calm she'd maintained for the last hour. She looked in her rearview mirror. The young man in the gray jacket was standing on the sidewalk scanning the street. She rolled down her window. Hey, she called. He was at her car in 4 steps. Ms. Richardson. She held up her phone. Someone just called me. Unknown number. 30 seconds ago. She heard her own voice, steady, factual, the voice she used in trauma bays, and was distantly proud of it. I need to report it to your boss. Now. He had his own phone out before she finished the sentence. Dante picked up on the first ring. They have my number, she said. They called me 30 seconds ago. A pause, very short, very controlled. What did they say? Emma repeated it word for word. She had a nurse's memory for exact language. She didn't soften it. Another pause. Longer. Emma, his voice was careful, precise. Are you safe right now? I'm in my car. Your man is standing next to me. Don't go home tonight, Dante said. I'll explain everything. But don't go home tonight. She stared through her windshield at the ordinary afternoon street people walking a bus passing the ordinary machinery of a city that had no idea. Okay, she said. I'm sorry, he said, for the second time that day. I'm going to fix this. She believed that too. God help her. I know, she said, and she meant it. And that was the most frightening realization she'd had all day. More frightening than the roses, more frightening than the call, more frightening than any of it. She trusted this man, and she had absolutely no idea what that was going to cost her. She didn't go home that night. Marco's man, the one in the gray jacket, whose name she eventually learned was Nico, drove her to a hotel in River North. Not a safe house, not one of Dante's properties. A regular hotel, her conditions honored. She sat on the edge of the bed with her shoes still on and her jacket still buttoned, and she called her mother and said she was covering an extra shift and would be home Sunday as planned, same as always. Don't worry. Her mother said, okay, honey, get some sleep. Emma said she would. She did not sleep. She sat with the lights on and her phone face up on the pillow beside her, and she replayed the voice from the call until she had it memorized. Low, deliberate, not angry, that was the part that kept snagging on her. Not threatening in the hot, impulsive way of someone making a bad decision in a heated moment. Cool, patient, like a man who had made this kind of call many times and found it entirely unremarkable. You shouldn't have brought him back. Next time, let the man die. Next time. She was still turning that over at 2 a.m. when her phone buzzed. Dante. She picked up before the second buzz. "You're awake," she said. "I don't sleep much." A pause. "Are you all right?" "I'm functional," she said, because all right felt like a lie she wasn't willing to tell at 2 a.m. "What did you find out?" The number was a burner, purchased in cash, activated once. They knew what they were doing. His voice was careful, measured, but underneath it she could hear something running very fast and very quiet, the sound of a man doing math in his head and not liking the answers. "The fact that they had your number means they've had more access than I initially assessed. Someone did their homework before they made that call." Emma sat up straighter. "Before the restaurant, before today?" "Yes." "So they knew we were meeting?" "Possibly, or they'd already been building a file before we made contact." He paused. "Either way, it changes the picture." She pressed her free hand flat against her knee, grounding, a technique she used with patience and shock. "What does it change?" "My timeline," he said. "I told you 2 to 3 weeks. I was being conservative. Now I'm accelerating to everything." Another pause and then quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly, even if the answer is that you want nothing to do with any of this anymore." "Ask," she said. "Is there anyone in your life, anyone at all, who might have reason to give your information to the wrong people? Someone you've had conflict with, someone who owes money, someone who might have been approached and said yes without fully understanding what they were agreeing to?" Emma opened her mouth, closed it. "You're asking if someone I know sold me out. I'm asking if it's possible." She thought about it the way she'd learned to think about hard things directly without flinching, without the cushion of denial. "No," she said finally. "Not deliberately, not someone who'd know what they were handing over." A beat. "But I posted on social media after my shift. Nothing about you, nothing about the ER, just that I'd had a brutal night and I was going home. It had my location tagged. Old habit. I usually turn it off, but I forgot." The silence on his end was very brief, but very loud. "Which platform?" he asked. She told him, heard him relay it quietly to someone else in the room with him. A muffled response she couldn't make out. "That may be enough," he said, coming back to her. "If they were already watching hospital activity and they flagged your name from the staff roster, a public location tag confirms the neighborhood, confirms the routine." A pause. "That's not your fault, Emma. I want to be clear about that. I know it's not my fault." She said it automatically and then stopped because actually, she wasn't sure she believed it yet. "I shouldn't have." "Don't," he said. "Don't do that. You did nothing wrong. You posted a tired comment after a hard shift. The fault here is mine. I brought this to your door the moment my men carried me into your ER." She didn't answer that because she wasn't sure she disagreed, and she wasn't sure the distribution of blame was the most useful thing to focus on at 2:17 in the morning. "Get some sleep," he said. "Nico is in the hallway. You're covered. Tomorrow I work a day shift," she said. 8 to 6. That wasn't a request for your opinion." A pause. "I'll make sure you have coverage at the hospital. Discreet coverage. I'm not having armed men standing in my ER." "Discreet," he agreed. "Good night, Emma." She almost said good night. Instead, she said Dante. First time she'd used his name directly. It sat strangely in her mouth. "Be careful. Whatever you're accelerating, be careful." A pause that lasted just a beat too long. "I will." She hung up and turned off the light and lay back, and this time eventually she did sleep. Not well, but asleep. She dreamed about white roses still in their wrapping and a door she couldn't remember closing. She woke at 6 with a certainty she couldn't entirely explain, the way she sometimes woke with the knowledge that a patient had turned overnight before she'd been told, before she'd checked the chart. A kind of reading of the air. Something had happened. She was right. Nico knocked on her door at 6:08 a.m. When she opened it, his face told her before he said a word. "There was an incident last night," he said carefully. "Mr. Moretti is fine. He'd like to speak with you." "What kind of incident?" Nico's jaw worked slightly. "Someone put a car through the front of the restaurant where you had lunch yesterday." Emma stared at him. "At 1 in the morning?" "Yes, no one was inside, no casualties. But the message was..." He stopped. "Clear," Emma finished for him. "Yes, ma'am." She stood in the doorway in her clothes from yesterday. She hadn't packed a bag, hadn't anticipated spending the night anywhere, and felt the situation tighten around her like something cinching. Not panic, she didn't panic, but the edges of ordinary life were pulling back further now, and what was underneath them was not something she had words for yet. She called Dante. "I heard," she said the moment he answered. "Are you all right?" "Yes." No pause, no performing. "I wasn't there. They knew I wouldn't be there. This wasn't an attempt on my life. It was a statement." "A statement directed at me," she said, "because they knew we'd been there. They followed us, or they'd had the place covered." "Yes," he said, quiet, controlled. The underneath running thing she'd heard last night was louder now, closer to the surface. "Dante," she kept her voice even, "tell me honestly, how bad is this?" A silence that she knew by now meant he was deciding how much to give her. "Bad enough that I'd like you to consider the second option," he said. "The property outside the city. We agreed, Hanam. I know what we agreed. I'm asking you to reconsider based on new information." His voice tightened fractionally. "They hit that restaurant 8 hours after you were in it. That's not a slow operation, Emma. That's people who are already positioned, already moving already. They're not being cautious. That changes the risk profile significantly." Emma walked to the window, looked out at the early morning street, ordinary and different, the same as it had been yesterday. "My mother," she said, "covered. I checked at 5 this morning. She can't go to a safe house. She has a doctor's appointment Thursday. She has a life." "I know. And I have patience." She pressed her hand to the cold glass. "I have people who depend on me. I have a Thursday shift, and I have a woman in room 4 who had a stroke last week, and she asked for me specifically, and—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I'm not saying this to be difficult. I'm saying it because this is my life. These are real people. They don't go on pause because someone decided to put a car through a window." Dante was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, lower, and without the careful managerial quality it sometimes had, like he'd set down something heavy. "I know," he said again, "and I'm not trying to take your life away from you. I'm trying to make sure you still have one." Emma turned from the window. "Then keep your men in place. Keep them good. And tell me what you're doing on your end, because I am not sitting in a room somewhere waiting for this to be over. If I'm in it, I'm in it. That means I know what's happening." Another silence. Longer. "All right," he said. "All right. You want to know what's happening? Then we'll meet again tonight. I'll come to you, wherever you want. My hospital. The parking structure on Damon. 7 p.m. A pause, brief surprise, she thought at the choice. A hospital parking structure was oddly specific. Also, she realized exactly the kind of place she'd be comfortable and he wouldn't, which was the point. 7 p.m. I knew, he said. "I'll be there." She went to work. The shift was normal in the way that normal had been recalibrated overnight. She triaged, she treated, she charted. She updated the woman in room 4. Mrs. Aguilar, 74, whose right-hand grip had improved since Tuesday, a small victory they both celebrated with more feeling than was probably professional. She ate half a sandwich in the break room and drank 3 cups of coffee and kept her phone face up at all times, which her colleague Diane noticed. "You all right?" Diane asked around noon. "You seem tired," Emma said. Diane looked at her with the unsentimental acuity of a woman who had 20 years of reading people in high-stress environments. "Uh-huh," she said and left it there, which Emma appreciated more than she could say. She didn't spot Dante's people in the hospital, which meant they were good, which was either reassuring or terrifying depending on the angle. At 4:30, her phone buzzed. Marco. She stepped into the hallway. "What happened?" "Nothing you need to be alarmed about," Marco said, which was precisely what you said when something alarming had happened. "We've identified the source of the white roses." Emma's grip on the phone tightened. "And a man named Victor Salinas. He worked as a mid-level courier for the Vasquez organization. He was sent to your address early Saturday morning to confirm you were there. The roses were his cover in case he was seen." Emma's stomach dropped straight through the floor. "He was at my door, in person." "Yes. He knocked on my door and She pressed her back against the wall. "I didn't answer. I saw the roses on the step and assumed—" "You were not in danger in that moment," Marco said carefully. He wasn't there to hurt you. He was confirming your location. For people who might want to hurt me. Yes, Marco said, and didn't dress that up. She stood there in the hallway of Cook County General and understood, with a cold and total clarity, that the Saturday morning she'd spent reasoning herself out of paranoia, the Saturday morning she'd called Jackie and said, "You're probably right," and believed it had been the morning a man stood at her door with roses and reported her exact address to people who wanted to use her as leverage against the man she'd saved. She had been 3 feet away from the beginning of something terrible, and she hadn't known. "Emma," Marco's voice was steady, deliberate. "You are safe right now. Nico is 40 feet from you. Nothing is going to happen inside that hospital." "I know," she said. "I know." She breathed out long and slow. "Where is Salinas now?" A pause. "He's been handled." She decided not to pursue what handled meant in this context. "Does Dante know?" "He's the one who told me to call you." Of course he was. She went back to work. She had 2 more hours on her shift, and she spent them being a nurse fully, precisely, without reservation, because that was the thing she still had that nobody had touched yet, and she was going to protect it with everything she had. At 6:58, she took the elevator to the parking structure. Dante was already there when she arrived. He was leaning against a concrete column with his arms crossed and his left side held slightly, carefully, the wound still making itself known. And he looked up when he heard her footsteps with an alertness that was pure unguarded instinct. The composure came back immediately, but she'd seen the half-second before it. He'd been worried she wouldn't show. "Marco told me about Salinas," she said, stopping 6 feet away. "I know. I asked him to." "You didn't want to tell me yourself." "I was going to, tonight. I didn't want you sitting with it alone for 2 hours in the middle of your shift." A pause. "Was that the wrong call?" She considered it honestly. "No," she said. "It wasn't." She looked at him. "Someone stood at my door 3 days ago. Someone I didn't know was connected to any of this." "Yes." "And now," she stopped, chose the words carefully, "and now that person has been handled." Dante held her gaze. "Yes. I'm not going to ask what that means. I wouldn't tell you if you did, not because I'm hiding it, because the specifics won't help you and they will stay with you." A pause. "Some things are better lived without knowing." She looked at him for a long moment. This was the part she'd been circling since the restaurant, since the phone call at 2 a.m., since she'd realized she trusted him. This was the part where the man she'd chosen to trust existed inside a world that operated by rules she didn't understand and couldn't fully accept. "I know what you are," she said, not as an accusation, just a fact placed between them. "I know you do," he said, "and I'm still here." Something moved through his face at that swift and private, and gone before she could name it. "I'm aware," he said quietly. "Every hour I'm aware." She looked away first, pressed her hands into her jacket pockets. "Tell me what's happening, what you're doing, what the next 72 hours look like. You said you were accelerating." He nodded once. "I've opened a line of communication with the Delgado family, Vasquez's main competition on the west side. They have their own reasons to want the Vasquez operation destabilized. We're working toward an arrangement. You're going to make a deal. I'm going to make a deal that makes you unnecessary to anyone's plans. Once the Vasquez operation is no longer a functioning threat, your value as leverage disappears. You become a civilian again." He paused. "That's the fastest path back to your life." "How fast?" 72 hours, maybe less." He met her eyes. "I need you to stay with the protection detail until then. No deviations, no calling your friend Jackie and laughing it off, no deciding the car outside is nothing." She went very still. "How do you know about Jackie?" He held her gaze steadily. "We pulled your recent contacts as a precaution. We needed to know who was in your orbit and whether anyone was exposed." Emma stared at him. "You looked at my phone records." "At the call log, yes. Without telling me. Before we'd met, before I knew you'd want to be told." He paused. "I should have disclosed that at lunch. I didn't. That was wrong." She was quiet for a moment, working through the layers of it, the violation of it, the logic of it, the strange and disorienting fact that she could hold both things at once, the privacy breach and the genuine intent behind it. "Is Jackie in danger?" she asked. "No, she's not close enough to you in a visible way to be a useful target." Good. A pause. Don't pull my records again without telling me first. Agreed. I mean it, Dante. I know you do. And then very quietly, I'm sorry. Third time he'd said that to her, she was starting to understand that it was not a word he used lightly or often. Her phone buzzed and she looked down, a number she didn't recognize. She looked up at Dante. He was already reaching for his own phone, eyes on her screen. Don't answer it, he said. She let it ring. It stopped, then immediately rang again. Don't, she answered it. Emma Richardson. A different voice this time. Not the deliberate, unhurried voice from before. Someone older, quieter. The kind of quiet that came from being the person in the room who never needed to raise their voice because everyone already knew. Yes, she said. You're standing in a parking structure with Dante Moretti right now. A pause, That tells me everything I need to know about the quality of your judgment, my dear. I had hoped you were smarter. Emma looked at Dante. His face had gone absolutely still. Who is this, she asked. Someone who would like to give you one more opportunity to make a different choice. The voice was almost kind, almost paternal. Walk away from him tonight. Get in your car, drive home, and by tomorrow morning, your name disappears from every list it's currently on. You go back to being a nurse, a good one, I understand. Emma's heart was hammering. Her voice was not. And if I don't, then we stop being careful around you. The call ended. Emma lowered the phone. Dante was already on his own, speaking in rapid, low Italian to someone she couldn't hear. He ended the call and looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, the first time since the trauma bay, since the restaurant, since 2 a.m. in a hotel room, he looked genuinely rattled. Something had cracked open behind his eyes. That was Rafael Vasquez, he said. The man in charge. Yes, his jaw was tight. He doesn't make calls like that personally. He stopped. He made that call himself. Which means what? Dante looked at her. It means you matter to this, more than you should, more than, he stopped it again. We need to move, right now. She didn't argue. She fell into step beside him, and as they moved toward the elevator, she said quietly, he knew exactly where I was standing, Dante. He knew I was with you, in this specific structure. I know. Which means someone told him. His voice was iron. Which means someone close to me. The elevator doors opened. They stepped in. The doors closed. In the sudden enclosed stillness, Emma looked at him and said the thing that had been building since the first call, since the roses, since she'd stood at her door on a Saturday morning and almost opened it. You have someone working against you from the inside. Dante met her eyes. Yes, he said, and I don't know who. The elevator began to descend, and the weight of that single sentence settled over both of them like a held breath, dense, pressurized, waiting for the moment it would have to break. Emma had walked into a war she didn't choose, and now the war was walking next to her, and it had a leak she couldn't see, and the man she trusted to keep her safe didn't know who to trust either. The car ride was silent for the first 4 minutes. Not uncomfortable silence, something tenser than that. The kind of silence that happens when two people are both doing math in their heads, and neither of them likes where the numbers are landing. Dante sat beside her in the backseat, his phone face down on his knee, his jaw set. Nico was driving. Another man Emma didn't know yet, heavy-set, older, careful eyes, was in the passenger seat. Dante hadn't introduced them, and she hadn't asked. She was thinking about the voice on the phone. We stopped being careful around you. Not a threat delivered in anger. A policy statement. A man informing her of a change in procedure, the way an administrator announces a new protocol. The absence of heat in it was the thing that kept turning in her mind cold and methodical, because she understood, in the way she understood bodies and what they communicated beyond words, that cold and methodical was far more dangerous than loud and angry. Loud and angry made mistakes. Cold and methodical did not. Where are we going? She finally asked. Somewhere they can't listen, Dante said. How do you know they're not listening now? He glanced at her. I don't, completely. A beat. Which is why we're not talking yet. She accepted that and looked out the window and thought about the inside man, or inside woman. She corrected herself. She didn't know enough to make assumptions. Someone in Dante's organization had known about the parking structure. Not the restaurant. The Vasquez people could have followed them there, could have had the area covered in advance. But the parking structure had been her idea delivered over the phone less than 12 hours before the meeting. The circle of people who could have known was small. She thought about Marco. She thought about Nico. She thought about the older man in the passenger seat whose name she didn't know. She thought about Dante and then felt immediately ashamed of the thought, and then examined the shame because shame wasn't useful and she couldn't afford it. She ruled him out not because she trusted him blindly, she didn't, but because the logic didn't hold. A man did not arrange his own shooting bleed out in an ER, spend a week recovering from surgery, and then personally engineer the surveillance of the woman who'd saved his life in order to what? Run an elaborate operation against himself. That wasn't the shape of this, but someone close to him, someone in the room when plans were made, someone who had been feeding information to Rafael Vasquez with enough regularity and accuracy that Vasquez had known in real time exactly where Emma and Dante were standing. The car stopped. They were at a building she didn't recognize, industrial block, not a neighborhood she knew well. Dante got out and she followed, and he led her up 2 flights of stairs and through a door into a space that was sparse and clean, a table, chairs, a window with the blinds down. A safe room, not lavish, functional. Marco was already there. Emma watched Dante's face when he walked in and saw Marco. And she watched Marco's face when he looked back, and neither face gave her anything definitive, which was its own kind of information. "Close the door," Dante said. Marco closed it. Rafael Vasquez called Emma's personal phone at 7:03 p.m. tonight. He knew her exact location. He knew she was with me in that specific parking structure. Dante set his phone on the table. "We did not publicize that meeting. The location was chosen by Emma this morning and communicated over an unsecured call. Who was in the room when I confirmed the meeting details with you this afternoon?" Marco's expression didn't shift, but Emma noticed his hands resting on the back of a chair, tightened fractionally at the knuckles. "You mean Tommy and Ren?" "Tommy and Ren," Dante said the names flatly. "Yes." "Not Nico." Nico was in the hallway. A short, dense silence. "Get Tommy and Ren on the phone," Dante said. "Now. I want both of them here within the hour." Marco was already dialing before he finished the sentence. Emma pulled out a chair and sat down because her legs were tired, and she was done performing steadiness for an audience. She could be steady sitting down. She pressed her hands flat on the table, felt the solidity of it, and addressed Dante directly. "Tell me about Tommy and Ren." Dante sat across from her. He looked like a man running a controlled burn, managing something combustible with total precision, giving it only as much oxygen as it needed to serve its purpose, no more. "Tommy Ricci has been with me for 9 years. He's 41. He runs logistics. He knows every movement I make because he has to. His job requires it." A pause. "Ren Marchetti, 36. He handles external relations, meetings, communications, liaising with other parties." "Other parties including the Vasquez organization?" Dante met her eyes. "Historically, yes. There was a period 2 years ago when we were attempting a territorial negotiation. Ren was the primary contact." Emma leaned forward slightly. "So Ren had an existing relationship with Vasquez's people. A professional one. Concluded. Or not concluded," she said quietly. Dante held her gaze for a long, steady moment. "Or not concluded," he agreed. Marco came back into the frame. "Tommy's 20 minutes out. Ren isn't answering." The silence was immediate and total. Dante stood up slowly. "How many times?" 3 calls, straight to voicemail." Dante turned away, put both hands on the back of his chair, and stood very still for approximately 4 seconds. Emma recognized the posture. She'd seen it in doctors getting terrible news they'd suspected, but hadn't confirmed yet. The body absorbing the weight of a thing it had been braced for, but was still not ready to carry. "He's running," Dante said. "We don't know, but he's running Marco." The words were controlled but final. "Find him." Marco stepped out of the room. Emma heard him on the phone in the hallway, rapid, low, the cadence of a man deploying people toward a problem. She looked at Dante, who was still standing with his back to her, and said nothing for a moment. "Then I'm sorry, I know he was 9 years is..." "Don't," Dante said, not harshly, more like a man carefully managing something that would break if it opened. "Not yet." She understood that too. The moment after a diagnosis when the patient needed 30 seconds before they could hear anything else you said. She gave him 30 seconds. He turned around. His face was composed. The whatever was underneath was back under sealed functional. I need to make some calls. You're safe here. Nico's outside the door. He glanced around, water in the cabinet. I won't be long. Dante. She said it before she thought it through. He stopped hand on the door. You already suspected Ren. Before tonight. He looked at her over his shoulder. What makes you say that? Because you didn't look surprised when Marco said his name. You look and confirmed. She held his gaze. You've been sitting with a suspicion for a while and you needed proof you didn't have. Now you have it. A long pause. You're very observant. I'm a nurse. I read bodies for a living. He turned to face her fully. I had concerns, he said carefully. Inconsistencies. Small things, a meeting that went sideways when only Ren should have known the road, a communication that was intercepted in a way that suggested foreknowledge. Nothing definitive. Nothing I could act on. He paused. In my world, you don't move against someone inside without certainty. Because if you're wrong, the consequences are severe. Am I finished? Yes. He looked at her. I was building towards certainty. Tonight accelerated the timeline. Because of me. Because of the call to you, yes. He shook his head slightly. Vasquez made a mistake. He was trying to rattle you and me, and in doing so he used Ren's information in a way that was too specific to explain any other way. A pause. In a perverse way, you being in this made it possible to identify the leak faster than I would have otherwise. Emma looked at him steadily. That's a very careful way of saying my being in danger had an upside. I'm not saying it had an upside. I'm saying sometimes the thing that costs you the most gives you the clearest information. He paused. I'm sorry you were the caught. She looked away, pressed her hands together, looked back. Make your calls, she said. I'll be here. He left. The door clicked shut behind him. Emma sat alone in the bare room with the fluorescent light and the sound of Chicago outside sirens traffic, the indifferent machinery of a city that was entirely unaware of the specific particular crisis being assembled in this room on this Tuesday night, and she pressed her palms to her face for a moment and just breathed. She thought about Sunday dinner at her mother's. She thought about Mrs. Aguilar's right hand improving by degrees. She thought about Jackie's voice saying, "You're paranoid, honey," and she thought about how 7 days ago those were the full contents of her world, and it had been a good world, solid and real and built on things that mattered. She took her hands away from her face. It was still a good world. It was still solid and real and built on things that mattered. She was just going to have to fight a little harder to get back to it. Tommy Ricci arrived 22 minutes after Marco's call. Emma heard the door and voices in the hallway. Tommy's, Marco's, Dante's, and then Dante came back into the room and sat down, and his face had shifted again. Harder, more resolved. Tommy confirms it, he said. He noticed Ren on a call this afternoon, shortly after our conversation. Stepping outside, which he sometimes does, so Tommy didn't think. Dante paused. He saw Ren look at his phone before stepping out. Tommy noticed because the phone was unfamiliar. Not Ren's usual device. A second phone, Emma said. A burner? Yes. Emma sat back. So Ren heard the details of our meeting this afternoon, stepped outside, called Vasquez's people on a secondary phone, and passed the location. Within hours, Vasquez made the call to me personally. Yes. Dante's hands were resting on the table. Still, too still, the way still things were when they were containing something large. Ren has been gone for approximately 3 hours. He took nothing from his apartment. We have someone there now. He left his personal phone on the kitchen counter, which means he knew the moment Vasquez made that call that it would be traced back. He was already in motion. He panicked, Emma said. He made a calculated decision, Dante corrected. There's a difference. Panic is reactive. What Ren did walking away with nothing, leaving the phone moving without tipping his departure, that's prepared. He had an exit plan. A pause, which means he's been preparing to run for a while. He was always going to run when the time came. Tonight was just the time. Emma sat with that. Where does that leave the deal with the Delgado family? Dante looked at her. You remembered that? I remember everything you tell me, she said simply. It helps me assess how much danger I'm in. A beat, something almost like admiration moved through his expression, quickly controlled. The Delgado arrangement is still viable. More so in some ways, I can present Vasquez's use of an inside source as evidence of escalating aggression, which strengthens the case for the Delgados to move against him. He paused. The problem is time. Ren ran because he knows I'm moving. Vasquez will know I'm moving. They'll try to act before I can finalize anything. How quickly can they act? Quickly enough that tonight matters, tomorrow matters. He met her eyes. The next 12 hours matter. Emma felt the weight of that settle. My mother, she said, already moved, Dante said. As of 40 minutes ago, she's with two of my most trusted people at a hotel in Evanston. She believes it's a water main issue in her building. He paused. I'm sorry we didn't tell you first. The window was narrow. Emma closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. You moved my mother without telling me. Again. Yes, Emma, No. She opened her eyes and the steadiness in them was not performed. It was the realest thing in the room. Don't apologize this time. Just don't do it again. Promise me that if we have more than 5 minutes, you call me first. Always. I promise, he said, and she believed it, which had become over the last few days less surprising than it used to be. What do you need me to do? She asked. He looked at her for a moment. Something shifted in his expression, not the controlled politician shift, but something underneath something real and slightly unguarded. What? In the next 12 hours, what do you need from me? She held his gaze. I know you've been managing me, protecting me, yes, but also managing what I know and when I know it and how much space I take up in the operation. I understand why, but we're past that now. Vasquez called me personally. He told me to walk away from you. He put a car through a restaurant window 8 hours after I sat in it. She leaned forward. Whatever this is, I am in it. So tell me what you actually need. The silence stretched for a moment. Then Dante said very quietly, I need you to stay. I'm staying. Not just tonight, He stopped, pressed his jaw together. The Delgado meeting is tomorrow morning. Rafael will know it's happening. If he moves against me before that meeting concludes, he can collapse the arrangement before it takes effect, which means tomorrow morning he has every incentive to hit hard and fast. He paused. My people will be distributed, protecting the meeting, managing the Ren situation, tracking Vasquez's movements, which means the coverage around you will be thinner than it has been. Emma absorbed this. You're telling me tomorrow I'm more vulnerable? For a window, yes, approximately 3 hours while the Delgado meeting runs. Can I be at the hospital? I'd prefer. Can I be at the hospital? She said again. Not a question, a position. He read her face and let out a slow breath. With two of my people inside the building. Visible to you. Agreed. And you don't leave the floor without telling them for 3 hours. I know It's 3 hours, Emma said. I've worked 12-hour trauma shifts on 3 hours of sleep. I can manage a contained morning. She paused. And when the meeting is done, Dante said, Vasquez's main alliance collapses. He loses his leverage on the south side. He becomes, in the parlance of our world, a problem that other problems are motivated to resolve without my direct involvement. He met her eyes. And your name disappears from every list it's on. You become a nurse, a very good nurse, and nothing else. She looked at him for a long moment. And us. The word landed in the room and stayed there very still. She hadn't planned to say it, but she didn't regret it because it was the honest question underneath all the other questions, the one that had been sitting quietly beneath every conversation, every phone call. At 2 a.m., every moment he'd looked at her with those careful dark eyes and said, I'm sorry, like he meant it in more than one direction. Dante didn't look away. That's a question I'd like to have a conversation about. He said, when neither of us is running a crisis. That's a very careful non-answer. It's the most honest answer I have right now, he said, because the honest answer has implications for your life, for what your life would look like. And I don't think either of us should be making decisions about implications in a safe room at 9 p.m. with a leak in my organization and Rafael Vasquez somewhere in the city planning his next move. Emma considered this. Fair, she said. But not a no, he said. She looked at him. No, not a no. Something passed between them. Quiet, charged brief, and then both of them, by some unspoken mutual agreement, set it down and stepped back to the business of surviving the next 12 hours. Marco knocked and entered. Delgado's confirming the meeting for 8 a.m. And we have a possible location on Ren Tollway camera, flagged a car registered to a shell company he's used before heading south on I-57. Dante stood up immediately. He's going to Vasquez. That's my read. If he gets there, he won't, Marco said. Santos and DiMaggio are already moving. Emma watched Dante and Marco in the shorthand of men who had worked together for years. Half sentences, single words meaning carried in inflection, more than vocabulary, and she understood for the first time with total clarity the full texture of the world she was sitting inside. Not an abstraction, not a crime drama. Real men, real consequences, real decisions made in real time with everything on the table. She understood it, and she was not leaving. Dante turned back to her. I need to step out again, an hour, maybe less. Then I'll have someone take you to a place you can sleep, safe, clean, not a hotel. Whose place? She asked. Mine. He held her gaze evenly. Guest room, separate floor. It's the most secured location I have access to, and tonight I'm not interested in taking risks I can avoid. A pause. You can say no. She thought about it for exactly 5 seconds. Okay, she said. Okay. She met his eyes. But I want coffee. Real coffee. Whatever you keep at this secured location of yours, I want it to be good. For the first time all night, possibly for the first time in longer than that, Dante Moretti smiled fully. Not the careful, controlled, almost smile she'd cataloged and analyzed. A real one. A tired, relieved human one that rearranged his whole face and made him look younger and considerably less like a man who ran a criminal empire. It's very good coffee, he said. Good, Auden, Emma said. Then we have a deal. He left the room again. She sat in the silence and pressed one hand over her heart, not dramatically, just checking it the way she sometimes checked a patient's pulse without thinking about it. Steady, a little fast, but steady. She was afraid. She would have been lying to herself to say otherwise. She was afraid in the way she'd learned to be afraid, with full awareness of the fear, full acknowledgement of it, and then the deliberate chosen decision to function inside it anyway. Her phone buzzed. Her mother's number. She picked up immediately. Mom. Hi, honey. Her mother's voice was warm and easy, floating above all of it like a boat above dark water. They brought me the most beautiful dinner here. Some young man knocked on my door with a whole bag of food. Is this a normal thing hotels do? Emma closed her eyes. Sometimes, Mom. How are you feeling? Oh, I'm wonderful. I thought the water main thing was going to be terrible, but honestly, this is like a little vacation. A pause. Are you all right? You sound... I'm fine, Mom. She kept her voice light. I'll see you soon, I promise. I know you will, sweetheart. You always come back. Emma held that for a moment. You always come back. Yeah, she said softly. I do. She hung up. Outside the room, she could hear Dante's voice, controlled rapid Italian she didn't understand, and the movement of people with purpose and the quiet machinery of a world she'd stepped into on a Friday night without knowing what she was stepping into. Tomorrow morning, everything would either resolve or explode. She had chosen her side. Now all she could do was hold the line until morning came. She slept 4 hours, not because she was calm, because her body was a machine. She had trained over 11 years of trauma nursing, and it knew the way well-used tools know that rest was not a luxury, it was a requirement. You slept when you could because you never knew when you couldn't. She'd learned that at 26 on her first overnight shift, and it had never stopped being true. She woke at 5:47 a.m. in a room that wasn't hers, in a bed that was better than hers, in a building she'd been driven to in the dark and hadn't gotten a full picture of. She lay still for 30 seconds, listening, cataloging the same assessment she made every morning, recalibrated now for different variables. No sounds of alarm, no urgency from the hallway. The particular quality of silence that meant nothing had broken overnight. She got up. The coffee was as promised. Very good. She found it in the kitchen, already made a full pot of note beside it in handwriting she didn't recognize that said, Mr. Moretti left at 5 a.m., back by 9. Nico was at the front. She poured a cup and stood at the kitchen counter and drank it in the particular pre-dawn stillness of a Wednesday morning and thought about her mother eating hotel food and calling it a vacation and the way that small, innocent happiness was the most painful thing she'd encountered in the last 6 days. She texted Dante. Coffee is good. You were right. How's the meeting? 3 minutes pass, then just starting. Stay inside until I call. She texted back, I'm working at 8. We discussed this. His response took 90 seconds. Nico will take you. 2 men inside the hospital. Don't make me regret this. She almost smiled. Don't give me a reason to. She put the phone down and finished her coffee and got ready to go save some lives because that was still through all of it, underneath all of it, what she did. She was on the floor at 8:04. She spotted Dante's men within 3 minutes, one at the end of the east corridor near the elevator bank, one near the nursing station, both in clothes that read civilian, but stood in the posture of people doing a job. She made eye contact with each of them, once nodded slightly, received a slight nod back. Terms of engagement established. Then she went to work. Mrs. Aguilar's grip strength had improved again. She could close her right hand around Emma's fingers now, with something close to real pressure. And when Emma told her, the old woman's eyes filled up, and Emma pressed her hand carefully and said, You're doing the work. All I'm doing is measuring it. Mrs. Aguilar said, You're doing more than that, mija. Emma didn't argue. She was charting at the nurse's station at 8:52 when her phone rang. Not Dante, not Marco. The number was one she'd never seen before, and she answered it with her stomach already tightening, because unknown numbers had not in the last 6 days brought good news. Ms. Richardson, a woman's voice, clipped, official sounding. This is Detective Sharon Calloway, CPD. I'd like to speak with you at your earliest convenience regarding events that occurred Friday evening at Cook County General. Emma set her pen down. What kind of events? The admission of a gunshot wound victim, a man named Dante Moretti. A pause. I think you know who I mean. The floor tilted slightly. Emma kept her voice absolutely level. I treat dozens of patients a week, Detective. I'll need to check what I'm able to share given patient privacy regulations. Of course, Calloway said. I'd also like to ask about your relationship with Mr. Moretti subsequent to that admission. We have reason to believe. I'd like to have our hospital's legal department present for any formal conversation, Emma said. Calm, professional, the voice she used when a patient's family member started threatening to sue. If you'd like to schedule something through proper channels, I'm happy to cooperate fully. A pause. That's your right, Calloway said. I'd encourage you not to wait too long, Ms. Richardson. Things are moving quickly. Things always move quickly in my line of work, Emma said. Have a good morning, Detective. She hung up. Immediately texted Dante, CPD, just called me. Detective Sharon Calloway, asking about Friday night and my relationship with you. His response was immediate. Don't speak to her without counsel. This may be connected to Vasquez. He has people in the department. How did she get your direct line? Emma stared at that. Same way everyone else seems to. I'll handle it. I know you will. He wrote back. And then after a meeting is going well. 90 minutes. She breathed. 90 minutes. She could hold a line for 90 minutes. She lasted 43 before everything changed. She was in room 7 with a man named Gerald who'd come in with chest pain that turned out to be severe anxiety, not minimizing it. She never minimized it. Anxiety could kill you in its own ways, and she was explaining his discharge instructions when Nico appeared in the doorway, and the look on his face stopped her mid-sentence. She held up one finger to Gerald. Excuse me one moment. She stepped into the hallway. What happened? Ren Marchetti, Nico said quietly. He didn't run to Vasquez. He ran to the police. He's been talking to CPD since 6 this morning. He's giving them everything, operations accounts, locations. Everything. Nico's jaw was tight, and he told them about you, that you were treating Mr. Moretti in an unofficial capacity, that you had knowledge of criminal activity and didn't report it. Emma stared at him. That's not true. I know. I treated a gunshot wound in an ER. That's my job. I had no knowledge of, I know, Nico said again, but Ren is building a narrative. He needs to give them something that holds their attention long enough for him to secure a deal. You're part of the narrative. The CPD call, Detective Calloway, not Vasquez's person in the department. Ren's reach out. A completely different threat vector coming from inside Dante's own organization aimed directly at Emma's professional life, her license, her career. Everything she had built for 11 years. Dante, she said. He knows. Marco just told him. The meeting is... Nico stopped by seemed to decide on honesty. The meeting is still running, but he knows. He wanted me to tell you directly. Is he coming? He can't leave the meeting. If he walks out now, the Delgado arrangement collapses, which means Vasquez wins, regardless of what Ren does. Nico met her eyes. He said to tell you he's sorry and that his lawyer is on his way to you right now. Best criminal defense attorney in the city. He'll be here in 20 minutes. Emma turned away from Nico and pressed both hands on the nurse's station counter and stared at the surface of it. She was aware of her own breathing, aware of the distance between the steadiness she was projecting and the thing running underneath it, not panic, but something that wanted to become panic if she let it. She didn't let it. She turned back. What's Ren's play? If he gives CPD everything about Dante's operation, what does he get? Immunity, witness protection, probably. Nico paused. He's not loyal to Vasquez. He was never loyal to anyone. He was managing his own exit for months, using the Vasquez connection to build leverage, using his position with Mr. Moretti to gather information worth trading. He shook his head. He played both sides until the middle collapsed. Smart, Emma said flatly. Until he isn't, Nico said. What does that mean? It means Marco has already been on the phone with 2 federal prosecutors who have been building a case against Vasquez independently, case that Ren's testimony could complicate. They are not enthusiastic about a deal that might muddy their water. A pause. Mr. Moretti has resources, Ms. Richardson. In many directions. She looked at him steadily. So Ren's leverage may be less solid than he thinks. Significantly less. She took a breath. And my exposure? If Ren's deal falls apart, his narrative falls apart with it. You go back to being a nurse who treated a patient, which is exactly what you are. Nico paused. 20 minutes for the lawyer, and the meeting is 90 minutes from done. That's all we're waiting on. 90 minutes, 20 minutes, numbers, timelines. She could manage timelines. Okay, she said. Keep me updated every 10 minutes. Yes, ma'am. She went back into room 7 and finished Gerald's discharge instructions without a tremor in her voice, because Gerald did not deserve to be shortchanged, because her life was on fire, and because she was still, through all of it, a professional. The lawyer arrived in 17 minutes. His name was Daniel Feist, 60-something, silver-haired, the contained authority of a man who had spent decades being the smartest person in rooms full of people who thought they were. He found her in the break room and shook her hand and sat across from her and listened for 9 minutes straight without interrupting while she told him everything, factually, chronologically, without editorializing. When she finished, he said, "You did nothing wrong." "I know that. Do you understand legally, concretely why you did nothing wrong? Because I want you to be fully secure in that before any official conversation happens." He leaned forward. "You treated a gunshot wound in a licensed hospital as a licensed nurse. Illinois law requires reporting gunshot wounds, which was done through the hospital's standard protocol, which you followed. You had no knowledge at the time of treatment of the patient's criminal affiliations. Your subsequent interactions with Mr. Moretti were voluntary and personal, not professional. At no point did you knowingly facilitate criminal activity." He held her gaze. "Ren Marchetti can say whatever he likes. What he cannot do is manufacture facts that don't exist." Emma felt something loosen in her chest, not fully, but enough. What if Calloway comes here? She won't, not while I'm in the picture. She knows me. He almost smiled. She doesn't enjoy the experience. "Can you stay until this is resolved?" "Mr. Moretti's office has asked me to remain available to you for as long as necessary." He folded his hands. "So, yes." Emma sat back. "He's thorough," she said mostly to herself. "In my experience," Feist said, "Mr. Moretti is the most thorough client I've had in 30 years. When he decides something matters, he does not do it halfway." She absorbed that. "How long have you worked with him?" "Long enough to know that this is the first time I've been dispatched to protect someone outside his organization." He paused and something gentler moved behind his professional composure. In case that means anything to you. It meant something. She went back to work and she watched the clock, and at 10:17 a.m. her phone rang and it was Dante. And she picked up and said, "Tell me," before he could speak. "It's done," he said. His voice was different, still controlled, but something had released inside it. Not celebration. More like the specific, exhausted relief of a man who had been holding a structure together with both hands and had just been permitted to set it down. The Delgado arrangement is finalized. Vasquez loses his West Side Alliance as of this morning. His two remaining lieutenants have already been contacted by parties I won't name and informed that the cost of continued association with Vasquez's operations exceeds the benefit. A pause. He's isolated, effectively finished as an operational threat. And Ren Oy, the federal prosecutors, declined his deal 40 minutes ago. His testimony is being characterized as self-serving and insufficiently corroborated. He paused. Calloway won't pursue you. There's nothing there to pursue, and she knows it. Emma let out a breath she'd been holding since 8:52 a.m. My mother, she asked, being driven home as we speak. She thinks the water main was fixed ahead of schedule. She's apparently charmed 3 different members of my security team. A pause. She invited one of them to dinner Sunday. Emma put her hand over her mouth for a moment, not crying, just the particular overwhelm of the comic landing inside the terrible. She managed. She sounds remarkable, he said. She raised someone remarkable. The words landed quietly. She let them. Where are you? She asked. 40 minutes from the hospital. A pause. If you want to see me. She looked at the clock on the break room wall. She had 4 more hours on her shift. I work until 6, she said. Oh? I know. She could hear the careful absence of pressure in it, the deliberate leaving of space. I'll come to you. Dante, she paused. Is it over? All of it? A longer pause than she expected. Vasquez is contained. Ren is neutralized. The immediate threat to you is resolved. He paused again. My world doesn't have clean endings. You know that. But the part of it that touched you, yes. That part is over. That's honest, she said. I told you I'd try to be. She looked at the break room table, the ordinary battered coffee ring surface of it, the world she'd built, the world she'd nearly lost, the world she was currently sitting inside unchanged and entirely altered at the same time. I'll see you at 6, she said. 6, he said. I'll be there. She hung up, sat for 1 more minute in the break room. Then she stood up, straightened her scrubs, and went back out to the floor and worked the rest of her shift like the professional. She was precise, present, fully committed to every patient who needed her, because that was the deal she'd made with herself 11 years ago. And nobody, not Rafael Vasquez, not a leak, not a week of controlled chaos had broken it. At 5:58 p.m., she walked out of the elevator into the hospital lobby, and Dante was there. No Marco, no Nico, no one else, or rather probably someone else somewhere but not visible, giving them the courtesy of distance. He was standing just inside the main entrance, and he looked for the first time since she'd met him like a man who had stopped managing how he appeared. He was tired. The surgery recovery, the last 72 hours, the weight of a week that would have broken most people, it was all sitting on him plainly without the Mafia patriarch composure to smooth it over. He looked like a man, a real one. Emma walked toward him and stopped 3 feet away, and they looked at each other for a moment in the lobby of Cook County General, which was where this had started, which felt now like something intentional, even though nothing about that Friday night had been intentional at all. You look tired, she said. You look exactly the same as you did at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday, he said. I don't know how you do that. 11 years of practice, she said. He looked at her. I have things I want to say to you, things I'd like to when you have time and we're not in a crisis, when we're just 2 people in a room. And he paused. I don't know how to do that without the crisis, honestly. I've been doing crisis for so long, I've forgotten the normal part, she said. Yes. He held her gaze. I'm not sure I was ever very good at it. Then it's a good thing you know a nurse, Emma said. We're very good at helping people recover things they thought they'd lost. Something moved through his face, the same real unguarded thing she'd seen when he smiled fully last night, but quieter this time, deeper. Is that an offer? He asked. She met his eyes. She thought about white roses on a doorstep and a voice telling her to walk away, and the night she'd sat in a hotel room with the lights on and made the choice to call Marco back, instead of calling the police, instead of calling Jackie, instead of running from a world that had come looking for her without asking permission. She thought about every moment since where she'd had the chance to leave, and had not because she was trapped, but because something in her, the same something that made her run toward a dying man on a gurney rather than away from the people surrounding him, had said stay. She had stayed, and she was still here, whole, clear-eyed, afraid of almost nothing right now. Come to dinner Sunday, she said. My mother's making chicken. She already invited one of your security guys, so you might as well come too. Dante stared at her. 6 p.m., Emma said. Don't be late. She hates it when people are late. And for the second time, the second real time, the kind that changed a face all the way down, Dante Moretti smiled. Emma Richardson had walked into the worst Friday night of her life 11 days ago with blood on her hands and a dying man on her table, and she had made a choice in that moment, the same way she always made choices without hesitation, without negotiation, with every ounce of herself aimed at the single clear priority of keeping someone alive. She had not known what it would cost her. She had stayed anyway. And on the other side of the debt, and the danger, and the fear, and the voices, and the phone calls in the dark, and the men with careful eyes in parked cars, and the voice that told her to walk away on the other side of all of it, she was still exactly who she had been when she walked in. Emma Richardson, nurse, daughter, woman who ran toward the thing that needed her and did not look back. Some choices change your life. This one had changed hers, and she had made it with open eyes, and she was keeping it, and she was not afraid. That was the whole story. That was enough.